and welcome to Business Edition. In this program, we'll be focusing on the NBC Twiga bonds, and to talk all about this, I have with me the Director of Treasury and Markets from NBC, Peter Nalitolela. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Okay, I think it's exciting news to know that you've come up with this public offer on the Twiga bonds, the NBC Twiga bonds. But just for the benefit of our viewers, when we talk about bonds, you know, in simple sort of language, what are bonds? And what are the benefits of bonds and the impact to the economy?
Okay, so a bond is a type of financial instrument. In somewhat more technical terms, you'd call it a type of security. And basically, in layman terms, a bond is a form of borrowing. Borrowing in what sense? Let's take an example of the different kinds of bonds. Let's take an example from the government perspective. The central government, for example, the government of Tanzania, can issue bonds. And when they issue bonds, it's for the purpose of raising money so that they can invest in different public services, investments in infrastructure, etc. And in Tanzania, we do have the treasury bonds issued by the government with maturities starting from 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10, 15, 20, and 25 years. And we have something else that is closely related to treasury bonds called treasury bills, which are also a type of borrowing that the government does. And these are much more short-term. They range between 1 month up to 1 year. And the government uses that partly to finance its expenditure, but also partly to try to control monetary policy. But moving away from the central government, you can also have local governments, for example, municipals, issue bonds as well for the purpose of investing in that particular municipality or that particular local government, for that particular government purposes. For example, we have not had one before, but we are in the process of Tanga municipality issuing the first municipal bond in Tanzania. And what they do is they borrow money from the public to invest, and what Tanga is going to be doing is to invest in developing water supply infrastructure for Tanga municipality. And NBC, we actually won the mandate to be the lead transaction advisors for that. Now, moving away from central government and local government, when you start talking about businesses, including NBC, but any other kind of business, we also do raise bonds for the purpose of financing our activities as a business. Anytime anyone starts a business, be it an individual like you and I, or be it a big company, you have to have sources of money to be able to finance your activities. And that can come from the owners of the business putting money down as capital or equity investment. But you can also raise money by borrowing. So a company, for example, can issue a bond. When they issue a bond, they borrow money that they will eventually pay back to whoever invested in that bond. Or they can have shareholders put money in, existing shareholders or new shareholders coming in. Now, for NBC in particular, we also do have different sources of managing our activities, raising funds for activities. And our main activity as a bank is the fact that we raise money from those that want to invest or save, and we extend that liquidity to those that have a shortage and they're looking for money to borrow for their own purposes. So, for example, you and I can borrow money to maybe build a house, a business can borrow money to finance its activities, etc. Now, as NBC, as a business, we're issuing a bond which we've dubbed NBC Twiga bond, whereby we're going to be raising money from the public, and what we're going to use that money for is for us to be able to lend to those that want to borrow from us.
We'll talk about the capital security markets in Tanzania, the trend. Are we seeing growth? What is the situation right now?
So yeah, definitely we are seeing growth. We're seeing growth in terms of both breadth, in terms that there are new products coming in. As an example, we do have a form of financing that is compliant to Sharia law called Islamic financing, or a sukuk bond. Is a type of a bond that doesn't pay interest, but rather the bond issuer acts as an agent whereby they use those funds to lend to someone else who also runs their business in a Sharia compliant way, and they have a profit share between the borrower of that liquidity and the investors. So that's a new thing that's come to the market very recently. There's an entity called Demand Finance that issued the first publicly issued sukuk finance. So we're growing in that direction, but also growing in terms of more players coming into the market, in the sense that in the past you had 1 or 2 bonds in issue, but now you have a lot more coming into the market. And we have new innovations that are coming through. The Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, for example, very recently issued guidelines on what we call sustainability bonds, which we'll speak about in a bit more detail later on. But that's something else that is new and coming. And the Tanga municipal bond that I spoke about earlier is not only is it the first municipal bond, but it will also be the first bond that is has sustainability features in that it supports the environment, so it's a green bond. Or in general speaking, sustainability bonds are those that either support environmental issues, social issues, or governance issues. So to answer your question in short, yes, the capital markets development in Tanzania is on a positive trend.
It's not positive.
And they're hoping to push more.
Okay, but the Tanzanians themselves, Tanzanian businesses, are they seeing the benefits of this? Is there awareness there? You know, or are they still not quite sure? And do they meet the criteria to be able to access, you know, these bonds?
Yes, quite a few of them meet the criteria. So I'll answer your question in two folds. Number one, from the investor side, there is that awareness, which is something that I'm very happy about. Tanzanians, we're finally waking up to a culture of saving and investing. There are lots of formal and informally formed groups, social clubs that invest. Individuals come to us, invest in treasury bonds, etc. So that's a positive. One area, and I'll turn to the camera and speak to the businessmen in Tanzania, is that we're looking for more of you to come to the market to raise financing through capital markets. The trend that we've seen in recent times is, from the corporate perspective, it's mostly financial institutions, banks and non-banking financial institutions that come into the market. We have, for example, right now, bonds that are trading. We have Exim, we have Tanzania Mortgage Financing Company, TMRC, we have NMB, and NBC will be coming to the market soon. But in the past, we had non-financial corporates, like TBL previously issued a corporate bond. We had Aluminium Africa issue a corporate bond. And we want to see more of that. So if you're planning to expand your businesses, there are different ways to do it. You can raise capital through issuing shares, doing rights issues, which is good. But we'd like them to come and issue corporate bonds. We'd like them to, more of them to come and list on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange and go public and list their shares. So as I shared, so the financial sector has been on the forefront, and the good thing about the financial sector is that it doesn't end with the, let's say, a bank in this case. It doesn't end with the bank raising the liquidity, but to extend that liquidity to those that want to borrow. So it's a ripple effect. So NBC, for example, when we issue our bond, it's not just for us to do something internally, but for us to extend that liquidity to our borrowers as well. But if we move away from the financial sector, we do have manufacturing is one of the big contributors to the economy in Tanzania. So I would like to see more manufacturing companies come in. You spoke about construction. Most of our construction infrastructure investment is government driven at the moment, but we do have a few big players there from the private side that can come to the public and issue bonds. But for sure, I would say to the manufacturing sector, I'm looking to you to be the next big players in the space. So
look, right now, we look at the trend that we're seeing the government or the private sector. When we look at these two players, where do you think you're seeing more interest in looking at bonds as for investment projects?
So with the government,
because I know the government has been the greatest borrower, but still, are we seeing more, interest from the private sector right now?
So so the government definitely, because treasury bonds have been there since we actually started going towards market economy and trying to liberalize the economy from the early to mid-90s, etc. So treasury bonds have always been there, and the government has been leading the way by doing new issuances, extending newer, longer tenor bonds. For example, when I first finished my first degree and went into the corporate world, the largest tenor we had was the 10-year bond. But since then, and around 2015, I think we issued the 15-year bond, and then we had 20, now we have 25, and they're thinking about long-term. And the government is also talking about specific targeted use of proceeds, and in particular talking about what we call infrastructure bonds, where it's not just the government is issuing bonds to raise money to fund its different activities, but they will issue something that is specific to invest in infrastructure development. So that's one area. But in the private world, private sector space, the interest is there, but it's coming slow. Most, like I said, it's mostly from the financial markets sector. But we'd like to see a lot more of non-financial institutions come to the market. The good thing is the promoters of most of these businesses do have an understanding themselves as individuals. They're investors. On a personal level, they do invest in these instruments. We'd want them to extend the same to the businesses. And maybe just circling back again a little bit to the public sector side, the government, we're moving away from the central government, they've been supporting and trying to issue directives on how we can work with municipalities, because a lot of these municipalities have good collections from different levies that the local governments collect, etc., different sources of income that they can use to repay the bonds. So instead of always them collecting and then maybe waiting for the central government to give them directions, giving them funds on how to invest, they can look at their own sources of funding and say, we can do this, we have this project in mind, let's go to the market, issue funds, and when we collect, we can come back to pay the public. So in short, yes, the interest is there, it's growing. Personally, I'd want to see a lot more momentum coming through. And once again, I repeat, at the risk of sounding like a parrot, the private sector,
okay,
I'm looking to you to be the next big movers.
Okay, why do you think the response is not so big? What is it what is the concern, do you think, that from the private sector?
I think to a large extent it's a cultural thing, because as a country we've only gotten into the market-driven economy in slightly around 30 years ago. We started reforming our economy in the early 90s, mid-90s. If we talk about the Capital Markets and Securities Authority, we're talking less than 30 years since the authority was formed. So it's a bit of time as more people see that this works, as we look more towards neighboring countries, as we look to big economies, the US's of this world, etc., how someone can start their own baby from scratch. You're talking about the Mark Zuckerbergs of this world starting Facebook and being happy to take it to the public and issuing shares, etc., and still be in control and be the face of that project that you started. If we look to that and say that just because I do go to the public and issue bonds or issue shares, it doesn't mean that I'm losing control of my business. It means that you are inviting more people to participate in your dream. You are only sourcing more sources of liquidity to grow a business even bigger. But at the same time, you still remain to be the founder, and you can retain control of the company by retaining a certain number of shares or by having certain classes of shares that will keep the control of the company. So as we grow and evolve, hopefully more people will know that if I have a business, I don't always have to look to my friends and family to raise new shares, new capital, or go to a bank to do direct borrowing. You can go to the market and invite everyone to participate in your dream.
Okay, look at the Tanga municipal bonds that you'll be it's taking off here next year, I think.
Yes.
Right. Why Tanga, and why this particular project?
So it's up to the municipalities to make the decision.
They came up with the decision.
Yeah, so Tanga
and they approached you.
Yeah, so they've been working with the UNCDF, United Nations Capital Development Fund, to advise them and to help guide them, etc. And they floated the tender to the market to look for lead transaction advisors. So those entities that qualify bid, and we worked with a consortium of other partners. So we put our bid in, and we came out best, and we won. So they did not approach us, but rather they went to the public and asked those entities that qualify, that are licensed by the authorities to do this kind of activity, to put the bids in, and we won.
Okay, so maybe elaborate a little bit more. What exactly does this entail?
So what a lead transaction advisor does is you work with the entity that is issuing, in this case Tanga Municipal, or whoever is issuing it. Let's say if it's NBC, we also, for our own bond, our Twiga bond, we have our own lead transaction advisor. So what they're supposed to help you do is make sure that all your steps, all the processes are followed in accordance with the laws and regulations. They also help you source other advisors, because you also need advisors from the legal perspective. So you need legal advisors, you need advisors you need reporting accountants that will look at your finances and say, yes, their financial statements in the past make sense. We've checked them, but also their financial projections make sense, because you can't just say, I want money. You have to tell people, what are you planning to do with it? What does the future look like? So the reporting accountant will also look at the projections and try to make sense of them. And they actually work on behalf of the public, because they're supposed to be the checkpoint to tell the public, if you put your money here, this is safe. And generally, the lead transaction advisor is supposed to help the entire process, handhold the issuer, so to speak, to make sure that everything follows the regulations. You have enough awareness going out to the market, and then you have enough people investing. You have good collection points, because you have to have a bank to collect those funds, etc.
Mm-hmm. So after this project, is there maybe possibility of other municipals, actually benefiting from such a program or such a project?
Yes, hopefully yes.
Are there any other municipals maybe earmarked, or is this the first one that you are trying to see? Maybe from the outcome of this project, then you'll be able to say, okay, we're ready to go on to the next municipal.
So again, like I said, it's down to the municipalities to decide, but and not.
But maybe it's up to them, but still maybe to sensitize, to tell them that hey, the opportunity is here. Why don't you use this opportunity, or are you just waiting for them to come up to you?
No, definitely. Us as market developers, we do have that responsibility and we play that role. We do advise them, we challenge them, and hopefully some will make a decision soon. And I will say no disrespect to Tanga, but the other municipalities that have a lot more sources of income, I won't mention any so that I do not appear to be favoring any.
Okay.
But I do challenge them to come to the market. There are lots of projects that we need to develop, infrastructure for our municipalities, marketplaces. We try to.
They'll also have to bring rapid development as well,
yes,
isn't it?
Exactly. So yes, hopefully more will be coming, and we're challenging them. We're ready to work with them, ready to advise them, and hopefully more will be coming through.
Okay, so let's come back to the NBC Twiga bonds. The public offer period, it's going to end the first week of December. Do you think this period is enough, or has the response been good? Tell us, how's it been going so far?
Yes, so just to shed a bit more light to our viewers, we got the approval right at the end of October from the Capital Markets and Security Authority for us to go public with this. Because anytime you want to issue such kind of instruments to the public, the authorities have to check, because you do not want to defraud people. You do not want people to put money in only to lose it all at one go. So we had to go through a lengthy process to get approvals from CMSC as the main regulator from the capital markets perspective, the Bank of Tanzania as our regulator being a bank, the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, because this is going to be listed on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange later on, etc. After that, we got approvals at the end of October. So on the 1st of November, we did our public launch to announce to the public that you're going to the market with this. And around a week later, we started accepting. We did what you call, you open the offer, so people can start actually filling in the forms and investing, putting money in the account. And we gave it a month, so it was from around the first week of November, the first week of December. And it's enough. So far, the traction has been good. We have about 11 days or so to go, and the progress so far is encouraging. And I do urge those of you that are still pondering whether you should do this or not, you only have 11 days to go, because the way this works is once we do close the window, you can still buy the bond, but then you have to go to the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, and they have to be a seller and a buyer for you to be able to invest in it. But coming back to your question, yes, the time is enough. We wish we could have extended a bit more, but we want to start
to get it going.
We want to start doing business. And
how much do you plan to raise?
So I'll answer your question in two parts. The first thing is, when we try to do this kind of an issuance, you have to think long term, medium to long term. And for us, we looked at our plans. We have very aggressive growth ambitions. The economy of Tanzania is growing thanks to the efforts put in by President, Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan, and we are trying to grow in tandem with how the economy is growing. And for us to be able to do that, we said we need to raise 300 billion shillings worth of bonds over the next 5-year period for us to be able to supplement what we raise from customers' deposits, for us to be able to lend to our customers and grow with the economy. But to start with, because the 300 billion doesn't come all at once, it comes in different tranches. The first tranche, which is what you're talking about right now, which is the offer is going to close on the 6th of December, it's going to be for 30 billion shillings. So that's the notional amount that we have asked for. But the regulations do provide for an opportunity to say, as an issuer, should you get more applicants than what you had initially indicated, can you take more? So for example, 30 billion, let's say people come to you with 100 billion worth of requests. How much more are you willing to go above 30? If you just want to stop at 30, that is fine. But we have what you call a green shoe option, which says if you want to, maybe if I have more, I can go up to, let's say, 50, you're allowed to do that. So 30 billion, in short, is what we're looking to raise at the moment. And that's why I'm urging the public to come in and invest early, because if you delay, you might miss out the opportunity.
So who are you targeting? Just businesses, individuals, who are you looking at?
So we're targeting pretty much everyone. So you can come in as an individual investor like you and I. You can go in, fill your form. I, Peter Nalitolela, want to subscribe, this is my 10 million shillings, etc. Or you can go as a group, and the group can be a formally registered group, an association, a circus, etc. Or it can be an informal group, because the law does provide, for example, even on normal account opening. As NBC, we do have what we call Vikundi accounts. So if you and your neighbors, or you and your family have, or you and your classmates have a group where you help each other on socio-economic perspective, you can open a joint account. You have signatories that have been approved, and you get them. You can come as a group, also invest in the bond as well. You can also invest as a minor. You don't have to be 18. But if it's a minor, then you have to have a parent or a guardian help the minor sign off on that investment. It can also be a private business. So, for example, it can be, let's say, an insurance company. You have premiums that you're collecting from your clients. You need to invest those premiums so that you can have monies to pay out in the event that you need to pay out claims. So insurance companies, any company for that matter, not just insurance companies, I just gave that as an example. I can invest. It can also be parastatals. For example, our pension funds, they're some of the biggest institutional investors in the country. So pension funds, other institutional investors. It can also be not necessarily an entity listed in Tanzania. It can be an entity that is abroad, an entity or an individual that is abroad. So for example, Tanzanians in the diaspora, you're very much welcome. And the No Capital FM is highly watched by our Tanzanians that are offshore. So if you're listening, you're watching, you're welcome. Do come and invest back home, come and invest into a bond.
Okay.
And what we'll ask, if it's an individual, ask for an ID like national ID, driver's license, passport, resident card for Zanzibar residents, voter's ID. If it's a company, of course, you need your documents for the company, documents that you submitted to bear to be registered as a company, etc. And we'll ask for 2 passport pictures, if you're an individual, for example. And you can visit any of our 47 branches that are available countrywide, or you can visit any licensed dealer member, or brokers, in short, that are licensed by the Dar Stock Exchange. Fill a form through them. It's deposit your money with an account that is provided in our website. It's also provided in the information memorandum or in the application forms. And then once you deposit that money, you fill your information, it comes to us. And at the end of the offer period, we'll start reconciling, etc., allocating. We'll announce the results around the 12th of December. And on the 15th of December, that's when we'll start trading on the Dar Stock Exchange, which means that if I'm the original investor, I bought the bond, I can decide 3 months down the road that maybe bought 100 million worth of a bond. I want to sell 20 million because I need the money to do something else. I can come, so talk to my broker. They float it the Dar Stock Exchange. You can go to the Dar Stock Exchange and buy.
Okay. So what is the minimum that you can invest in?
So the minimum amount in this initial period, which we call basically this is a primary market. So when you're doing the initial public offering, the minimum is 500,000, like itano tu, kwa lugha ya Kiswahili. And it goes in increments of 100,000. So it can be either 500,000, 600,000, 700,000.
Oh, so within this period, I can actually increase and,
Yeah, so for example, you can fill in the form today, invest a bit,
and then after 2-3 days, I'll decide to add some more. I can do that. It's possible.
Yes, but again, it has to be multiples of 100,000. So it cannot be like 750,000. No, it has to be 700,000 or 800,000 and so on and so forth. But afterwards, when you start trading on the secondary market, when you start trading on the Dar Stock Exchange, you call that secondary market, you can trade any amounts that you want.
For the individuals out there or businesses that you're trying to sensitize them to come and use this opportunity, at the end of the day, why should they invest in such a bond?
Number one, it's a hassle-free source of income for you. So to put it in perspective, and I'll say this very carefully, I do not want it to be construed that I'm discouraging other forms of investment. You need to diversify your investment portfolio. But when you have a holding like NBC Twiga bond, it's hassle-free in that you don't have to chase after clients to pay you. You don't have to chase your employees to do work, etc. So you can start this in your money, and so we pay 10% per year, but it's paid semi-annually, which means half of it you get every 6 months. So when we close in December, 6 months after will be June 2023, and then 6 months after that, December 2023, we'll pay you half of what the 10% amounts to. So if, let's say, it's 10 million shillings, 10% of it is a million, which means every 6 months you get 500,000. Hassle-free, deposit to your account directly. You don't need to initiate anything. You give us your detail day one, that's where you deposit your money. So you don't have to worry about that. Number two, it's a very safe investment. Because NBC is a very strong bank, it's actually the longest continuously existing commercial bank in the country. We've been here for more than, for almost 60 years now, so 55 years around, since 1967. But we do have strong shareholders behind us. We have the government of Tanzania. You cannot go any better than that in terms of shareholders within Tanzania. We do have the World Bank through their commercial investing IFC, International Finance Corporation. They're also investors. And we have ABSA Group as a major shareholder as well. So we have strong shareholders behind. So, the way you're investing, the shareholders are backing up the issuer, which is NBC in this case. And then you don't have to pay any withholding tax on the interest end. So 10% is 10% clean. It comes into your account as is. And if you try to compare different forms of investment, and again, I'm not describing one form of investment over another, but let's think about what most Tanzanians do whenever we have surplus income to invest. We think about maybe building a house to rent, which is good. It's always good to own property. But if you had, let's say, 100 million, you invest at 10% per annum is 10 million. Divide that per 12, it's slightly north of 800,000 a month. If you had 100 million, you built a house, you'll never create 800,000 in rents for a 100 million shilling house. So you can just compare and see how lucrative the returns are.
Okay, so the opportunity is there for Tanzanians. They shouldn't waste it. But what happens if you don't realize the target that you want?
That is not something I worry about.
I know that, but what happens? What would happen if something like this happens?
So
if you fall short, maybe.
Yeah. So, for example, speaking generally, so an entity can go to the market, issue bond, and you have what we call undersubscription, whereby people do not turn up to the extent that you're hoping. Then you take whatever that amount that you were able to raise at that point, and you proceed. But based on the strength of the performance, based on the performance of the bank, because we are the third largest bank. We have quite a big balance sheet. We have more than 2.7 trillion assets. As at the end of September, we had we had profit before tax amounting to 65 billion shillings. So a very profitable bank, and we've marketed well. So, and based on what we've collected so far, we know we will not be undersubscribed. But to answer your question short, if an entity does issue and they undersubscribe, then you have to take what you're able to raise, proceed with it, and hopefully next time around you'll have better response from the investors.
As you said, with the performance that the bank has been having over the years, you're not likely to undersubscribe. But just as we wind up the program, for the benefit of the viewers, a final word to encourage them to come up and invest in such a bond.
Okay, so the first thing that I would say is beyond the returns that I spoke about, hassle-free returns, good returns at 10%, etc. But you also be partnering with the bank that, like I said, we have shareholding from the government, 30% owned by the government, which means that you're contributing directly to the income that the government will get in forms of dividends. If we are profitable as a bank, you contribute towards taxes that we pay. But NBC is a good force for good in terms of growth in the country. We do have partnership, for example, with the Premier League in Tanzania, the top flight, the top tier in football. We're the main sponsors in NBC Premier League. So through that, we provide employment to more than 9,000 people. We also, with a footballing loving nation, so we provide entertainment to Tanzania. So you'll be partnering with us on that regard as well. Not only do we sponsor the league, we also went far and provided insurance, health and life insurance to players and staff for the teams that play in the NBC Premier League. We do sponsor NBC Marathon, for example, which aims to raise funds to fight against cervical cancer. So number one, we promote health through running, through marathons, but also the funds that we raise go towards supporting the fight against cervical cancer. So generally, we are a force for good. And it's a very vibrant and dynamic bank. We have digital solutions through NBC Kiganjani. You can bank anywhere using your app, or you have good corporate online banking solutions. So you can be proud and say that I invested in an entity that helps the growth of Tanzania, a force for good for sure. When we are conveniently everywhere. Daima karibu nawe.
Okay, very encouraging words there to wind up our program. Thank you so much for taking part in this program.
Thank you.
With that, we've come to the end of Business Edition. I had with me Peter Nalitolela, who's the head of Treasury and Markets from Bank NBC. My name is Yvonne Msemembo saying goodbye. Until next week, same time.
Watch Capital Television on Zouk Decoder, channel number 067, Digitech Decoder, channel number 1103. Capital Television, your channel of choice.